Blessed Thomas of Tolentino, by Father Silas Barth, from the Franciscan Herald. The sons of Saint Francis were called to preach the truths of salvation not only to the Christian peoples, but also to the pagan nations. Obedient to this call, they, from the very beginning of the order, traversed the countries of Europe, everywhere preaching penance and leading men to the practice of piety and virtue, and at the same time, they passed into Africa and Asia, where, amid the greatest privations and dangers, they spent themselves for the kingdom of God. So great was their zeal for the salvation of souls still enveloped in the darkness of paganism that, at the end of the 13th century, they were to be found in most countries of the known world, as far south as Nubia, in Africa, and as far east as China. By their fervent preaching, which was confirmed by the holiness of their lives, they succeeded in founding many missions and in converting thousands of unbelievers to the true faith. Many had the happiness of crowning a life full of apostolic labors with a martyr's death. Among these are to be reckoned Blessed Thomas of Tolentino and his companions, who suffered for the faith in India. Nothing is known of the youth of Blessed Thomas. After entering the order of Saint Francis, he was distinguished for his zeal in the strict observance of the rule. In 1290, he, with several of his brethren, was sent to Armenia, and in this difficult field of labor he toiled with gratifying success until 1292, when he was entrusted by the ruler of that country with a mission to the Pope and to the kings of France and England, to obtain their aid against the Saracens. This mission accomplished, Blessed Thomas returned to Armenia and resumed his apostolic labors. In 1302, he was sent with 12 companions to the missions of Tartary, which name was used at that time to designate all the countries ruled by the Mongols. After several years of successful labor in this vast region, the holy missionary finally reached Cambaluc, now Pekin. Here he met Father John of Montecorvino, one of the greatest missionaries of his age, who had founded many Christian communities in that country and who was held in high esteem by the great Khan of the Tatars. The outlook for the spread of the gospel in China and the surrounding countries was bright, but while the harvest was plentiful, the laborers were few in number. Father John of Montecorvino, accordingly, asked Blessed Thomas to return to Italy to obtain apostolic laborers for China. Thomas arrived at the papal court in 1307, and after giving an account of the successes of Father John of Montecorvino and his companions, he entreated the Pope to provide for the missions in their charge. The Pope, full of joy at the good news, directed the Minister General of the Friars Minor to select 7 of the most learned and most zealous of his brethren and to send them to those distant lands. The 7 friars chosen were raised to the episcopal dignity and commissioned to consecrate Father John of Montecorvino Archbishop of Cambaluc, after which they were to labor with him as his suffragans. Blessed Thomas returned to China with these missionaries and other friars, and arrived at Cambaluc in 1308. He at once placed himself at the disposal of the new archbishop, and he was sent by him to preach the gospel in Hindustan. Here he labored with great success for many years, converting thousands of pagans to the true faith, and at length crowned his apostolate with a glorious martyrdom. In the company of Father James of Padua, Father Peter of Siena, and the lay brother Demetrius of Tiflis, Blessed Thomas of Tolentino had said the holy missionary set out for Kolan, on the Malabar coast, in India, but he was carried to Thana, in the island of Salsette, near Bombay. The governor of the district, urged on by fanatic Mohammedans, began a dispute with the friars on the divinity of Christ, and when his arguments were triumphantly refuted, he angrily demanded of Blessed Thomas what he thought of Muhammad. The intrepid missionary replied that Muhammad was an impostor who would drag to perdition all that believed in his false doctrine. On hearing these words, the Mohammedans became furious and employed both threats and promises to induce him to recant what he sayed. Seeing that Blessed Thomas and his brethren were immovable, they tore off their cowls and exposed the friars, tied to posts, to the full heat of the sun, which in those regions is so great that it causes death in a very short time. The holy confessors stood exposed to the burning rays of the sun for 6 hours, singing the praises of the Lord, without suffering the least harm. This, however, served only to increase the rage of the persecutors. They led the friars to a place outside the town and cruelly put them to death. Blessed Thomas was the first to receive the martyr's crown. His head was struck off while he was kneeling in prayer, recommending his soul to the Lord and his Blessed Mother. The glorious death of these martyrs took place on April 9, 1322. Their bodies were buried by the Christians of the place, and many miracles were wrought at their tomb. Some years later, Blessed Odoric of Pordenone, passing through that country, exhumed their precious remains and brought them to China. The head of Blessed Thomas was taken to Italy and placed in the Church of the Franciscans at Tolentino, his native city. Later it was transferred to the cathedral. Pope Pius VII, in 1809, confirmed the veneration paid to Blessed Thomas by the faithful. Taken from the April 1918 issue of the magazine, Franciscan Herald.